Well, it's a given that I can talk a lot faster than I can write. So I'm going to go ahead and make a series of videos, and that'll get you into Islam. These are unscripted videos. I don't have any text to work with, so I'm going to hem and haw here and there, and I may have to double back and correct a thing or two as I go. But bear with me, they'll be all right. This first one is about Islam's beginnings, and Islam's beginnings are all about Muhammad. Muhammad was born in 570 CE, about 1450 years ago, in Arabia, in a little town called Mecca. Mecca is about halfway up the Red Sea coast and inland about 30 miles. And in Muhammad's day, it was just a hot, dusty little hole. An oasis, but forget the romantic pictures of what oases were like. This was built around the Zamzam well, and 3 clans had come to settle in that vicinity. So there may be 300, 400 people in town in Muhammad's day. But Mecca had something the rest of Arabia didn't have. They had the Kaaba. Now, Kaaba may be the word that gives us cube, but I don't know that for sure. What I can tell you is it's almost a cube, and it's a nondescript building. Today it's made out of just plain granite blocks. It's been rebuilt many, many times over the last couple of millennia. Its origins are in kind of a misty past. Islam says Abraham built the first Kaaba, but whether that's historically true or not, I don't know. What I know is today you look at it, it looks beautiful with the black silk that hangs over it, and it's got golden embroidered letters with Quranic verses on it. But it's not a building to go into. It's not some place you enter to worship. There is a door, you can go in. You can't, people can. Every once in a while, a person goes in to do some maintenance work, but the vast majority of people don't go in. You use the Kaaba as a focal point for your circumambulation. You walk around the Kaaba in a counterclockwise direction, just sort of like baseball, and that's what the Kaaba's function was. Now, in Muhammad's day, some people probably thought of it as a religious thing because they'd put their idols in the Kaaba and then they walk around it. But most people, it was just a chance to take a morning walk and have a chat with a friend. Sort of like climbing Payas to a peak would be. At any rate, in Muhammad's day, the people of Mecca had somehow communicated the idea that in the precinct of the Kaaba, there's to be no violence and no deceit. Somehow they got that to stick. And that's important because in those days Arabia didn't have any kind of a central government, so there wasn't someone to enforce law. It was all about tribal justice, which means that if somebody kills one of the members of our clan's responsibility is to go and kill somebody from that clan in retaliation. It doesn't even have to be the killer. It just has to be a tit for tat, and that's what holds everything in balance. Or it should. Actually, in reality, it led to a lot of feuds, things that would go on for generations, the Hatfield-McCoy thing. And by emphasizing that in the precinct of the Kaaba, that doesn't happen, it made it a safe zone. And that idea, no deceit, sure appealed to the Bedouin traders, those guys with those long lines of camels that crisscross Arabia from oasis to oasis. They figure if you're going to make a big deal, you make it in the precinct of the Kaaba because that's the best place to get a fair shake and honest deal from the other guy. So, in Muhammad's day, Mecca was undergoing boom times. And boom times mean that support in town for the economy starts to take off as well, including trucking. Now I don't mean motor vehicles. In those days the trucks were camels, but Khadijah had a camel company, a camel trucking company, so that when a Bedouin would come in and would buy a bunch of cotton, trade a bunch of dates for some Egyptian cotton, and now needed an extra camel to take that home, he was able to go to Khadijah and say, I need an extra camel, and she would sell or rent a camel to him, and he'd be all right. He could take off. And Khadijah's business acumen was faring well. Well, it was faring so well that she needed somebody to help out, somebody to take care of the animals while she took the business. And so she said to Muhammad, yeah, Muhammad's back in the story. Would you like a job? Well, Muhammad had grown up almost an orphan. Right after he was born, his mother had died. He was a small boy when his father died. His grandfather took him in, but he only lived till Muhammad was 14, so an uncle helped get him to adulthood. So yeah, he needed a job. So he went to work for Khadijah as a camel herder. And there was something about Muhammad. He had this charisma. And I'm not saying that from a religious standpoint. Whether you believe his religious perspective or you don't believe his religious perspective, the only way the whole story comes together is that Muhammad was a charismatic human being. He loved to talk. So someone would come in and say, I need a camel. And Khadijah say, Muhammad will take you around back to get you something. And Muhammad would talk to you the whole time while he's getting the camel ready. Talk, 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 talk. And in that way, he'd say, what's going on? Where are you from? What kind of religion do they do there? What's the politics? What's the news? What's happening? He came to know all of Arabia in this way. All right. Muhammad was such a charismatic guy that the business was doing better than all other camel trucking businesses were doing, and Khadijah liked it, and she also kind of liked his charisma. So she said to him, I got an idea. Even though she was 14 years old, she looked at him and said, 14 years older than he was, she looked at him and said, you're a pretty good camel herder. You'd probably make a pretty good husband. What do you say? She proposed to Muhammad. And the two of them got married, and they ended up having some daughters. They seemed to have a very happy marriage. Now let's fast forward the story. We're getting all the way to when Muhammad's 40. And it's summertime, and it's hot, really hot. It's the Arabian desert. It's like 122 degrees out there on a regular basis. So people in Mecca would go into the hills around the city where there were a bunch of these little tiny caves, and they'd sleep in those cool caves at night. And one night, Muhammad was at the outside the opening of the cave while Khadijah and the daughters were inside asleep when something happened. Later, the description is the angel Jibreel seized him in a bear hug and almost crushing him to death, finally released him and said, recite in the name of your Lord. And Muhammad had no idea what to make of this. He crawled inside the cave and he shook Khadijah awake and he said, I think I'm losing my mind. And she said, talk to me. And he told her everything that had happened, and she listened, and at the end she said, did it ever occur to you that this might be God? And in that moment, Khadijah became the world's first Muslim. She believed the message even before Muhammad himself. Wait a minute. This would be a great place for you to get some points. I'll tell you what. Send me the name of the world's first Muslim, and I'll get you 3 points. And if you spell it right, I'll make it 5. Now let's get back to whatever it was I was talking about. So this thing happens hundreds of times, and we'll pick up on that when we talk about the Quran. But suffice to say, it didn't make Muhammad a popular guy. As he went around Mecca telling everybody these messages he was receiving from God, it turns out that people who are wealthy and ignoring the poor don't like some guy coming along in the name of God, criticizing them for being wealthy and not taking care of the poor. And so Muhammad was rather persecuted over the next few years. In fact, toward the end, they even tried to kill him several times. And finally, in 622, the people of Yathrib, that's a town that's further up the Red Sea coast, they sent a message to Muhammad and they said, hey, why don't you come on up here? We accept your message. So, in 622, Muhammad and a small circle of Muslims made their way to Yathrib. It's now known as Medina, for Medinat al-Nabi. That's the city of the Prophet. And that's the beginning of the Hijra calendar that Muslims use. But Muhammad couldn't let go of the idea that back in Mecca, people were still mistreating the poor. And so for the next 8 years, he tried talking, he tried fighting. There were battles like the Battle of Badr, the Battle of Uhud, the Battle of the Trenches. And nothing doing. He couldn't get Mecca to go along with the message. So finally, in 630, he showed up at the gates of Mecca with an army of 10,000. And the people of Mecca opened the gates, and the army entered the city. And from that moment on, Mecca was a Muslim town. Muhammad lived for a couple more years. He died in 632, and by then, Islam had begun to spread across Arabia. And that's pretty much where we're going to leave it for now, until the next video.